Richard Benjamins. Richard did make the PhD at the University of Amsterdam, and he has been from the early days working in the semantic web community, but from the company side. So he started in Isoco, that was a Spanish company. He was founder of this company, and later on he moved into Telefonica. Later on he went into AXA, and now he returned to Telefonica. So he has been working during the last years on everything related with big data and also data analytics. So
okay, thank you very much, Ashwin. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy that I'm also a professor now. If you look at the program, I think I'm one of the few speakers who's not from the academic world, although I have, as Ashwin said, an academic background, but I work in a company. So I will give more a pragmatic view on artificial intelligence, and specifically on the impact artificial intelligence has beyond its, let's say, technical opportunities, but the impact on ethical questions and societal questions if it's used at large. So I think apart from the big companies we all know that use and develop a lot of AI, there are also many more and more companies that are using artificial intelligence all across their businesses, about internal users to optimize their business. It's about marketing, it's about recommendation, but it's also about optimizing supply chain. So very, let's say, not very sexy applications, but they have a huge impact on the business, or changing the interaction with the customers, like bringing the Siris and the Alexas to the context of enterprises in the customer service relation. There's also a lot of work going on in getting insights from enterprise-held data. So data that a utilities company has, that a financial institution has, like a bank, or the telco company has a lot of insights that are proxies for societies, things happening in societies. And actually you can use that as a business, but you can also use it for social purposes, to help achieve the sustainable development goals. So for instance, in a telephone network, there's a lot of information about mobility patterns, and if you overlay that with contagious diseases like Ebola or Zika, you can actually predict, if you know where it starts, where it will probably propagate next. So there are a huge amount of applications, which is all good, and we've seen actually very good things today about what artificial intelligence can do. But if you look at the press, there are also some things that concern us, in general. And last week there was an article in The Guardian that said, automating poverty. Now it's a bit alarmistic, but still there are a lot of systems that take automatic decisions about social welfare, and sometimes they get it wrong. So what happens in that case? The middle photo, I think we all see, we have a camera, you take a picture of some people, and you have the rectangle around the face. But in the first editions, if you were black people, you didn't get this rectangle. And that's, of course, it's discrimination. It's not that this software or this company wants to discriminate against black people, but it's just that training the model hasn't used a diverse set of photos, but it used mostly white people. So there are all kinds of examples that bring concerns about the massive use of artificial intelligence. If it really goes beyond, and it is already beyond academia and universities, it really goes to society and to governments. Explainability, we saw it. If you take medical diagnosis, you have to understand why it's happening. If you are refused a certain credit from a bank, and also you may want to know why that is the case. And if you use certain algorithms, actually, you don't know. So that's an issue. Privacy, of course, we've seen here job loss, the future of work. So these are all things that are becoming important as companies and organizations and public administrations use more and more this kind of technology at a large scale. Now, and actually, this is mostly trial and error, learning by doing, because many companies have made some mistakes and then they start to formulate. So there are a lot of organizations that have started to act. They have come up with what they call AI principles, which says, okay, whatever we do with artificial intelligence, it has to comply with certain principles. Yeah, Google did it because it was driven by employees who were not agreeing with some things they did. Accenture has something, an interesting tool. Facebook, IBM, even Telefonica, more, let's say, traditional industries are beginning as well. And we, of course, know all the work that the European Commission has started with these ethical guidelines for, the guidelines for trustworthy AI, yeah? Which is a lot of things, yeah? And if you are a government, and we've seen it before, there are more and more governments who issue their strategy for artificial intelligence, and there is even a template that you now can use as a government to write your strategy, which was published last week by the World Economic Forum. However, if you are a company, then actually you have many things that are important, yeah? You see all kinds of things happening, important words, I don't know what's happening now. And you're a bit overwhelmed. Yeah? So it's all about the future of work, fake news, malicious use of AI, privacy, security, safety. So really, what you should do as an organization, yeah? Well, let's see if we can get some structure in all these terms from an organizational perspective. Yeah? The first is that this is a study done by Harvard that looked at many company and governmental and institutional principles on AI that have been published, and they try to get some order into that. Yeah. So if you look, so the colors is civil society organizations, green is governments, multi-stakeholders, private sectors, and in the middle you see all the different. They distinguish between 8 kind of principles, which is about transparency, explainability, bias, human agency, privacy, security, safety, etc. Yeah? So they try to make an effort in organize it a little bit, yeah? How to look at it. But actually, if you look at all those things that you might have to take into account, actually you have 2 ways to look at it. Yeah? You can make a kind of divide between some things are really important for governments, like the future of work, yeah? Concentration of power and wealth in certain companies, what is the real relation between people and machines, the relation robots, things that matter more to governments. Well, all the things are really within the scope of organizations, yeah? Like privacy, security, how to deal with that, fairness and non-discrimination. So there seems to be a kind of split between what you should worry about if you are an individual organization. Yeah? So that might help a little bit to get some more structure in where you should focus, rather than focusing on everything that is related to the social and ethical impact of AI. Focus on a subset of that. And there is actually another thing that you can look at. If you look at the same factors, you can also make a kind of division, yeah? Between things that are unintended. So that is because we're using this kind of technology, other things happen, but actually it's not necessarily that you want it, but just a side effect of using it. Yeah? And then you have things that are intended. Yeah? So you can use, if you want to you make malicious use of artificial intelligence, like terrorists or other criminal organization, of course they can. Yeah? It's not an unintended effect, it's really wanted. And if you are an organization, you want to do, let's think, AI for good, like help achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, improve health, etc. It's also a conscious decision. But things like, well, now that I use AI, I have suddenly a privacy or a more important security problem. I might discriminate. Well, no, that's something that of course you don't want to do, but it's still something that you have to face to. Yeah? So if you want to work with this, then actually, as an organization, you could focus on the left-hand side, yeah? Which is on the organization side, and actually not so much on the intended ones, because of course you know, but focus more on the unintended one. Yeah. So if you're an organization, you want to make a statement about how to work with artificial intelligence, whether you're a public administration or a company, those are the things that you would need to focus on. Yeah. There's actually another division that you can make if you look at those factors. Yeah? So here you have again the factors that are relevant for organizations. you can look at it from an end-to-end perspective, yeah? Or you can look at more an AI specific. Yeah? So there are things in this space that are really related to artificial intelligence. So if you discriminate because of your machine learning algorithm, etc., as something that's really related to artificial intelligence. But if you are worried about privacy, it's not only for artificial intelligence. Any information system that is working, you have to deal with privacy, you have to deal with security, and you have to do, of course, you cannot do anything against human rights. So there is a split, but it is true that some parts that companies and organizations have been worried about always have gained more importance with the massive uptake of artificial intelligence. For instance, privacy has always been important, but actually now it's even more important because the data is so much used for all kinds of things that you're as an organization, you're just more exposed to, you have to take it more seriously. Yeah? So it's not it's not a very clear split, yeah? But obviously you can say, okay, this is more to the right, this is more end-to-end, this is more AI specific. So what you can do, if you look at some things that have been published, for instance, the ethical guidelines of the trustworthy AI guidelines of the European Commission, it's towards an end-to-end spectrum, because it includes most of the things that have to do with artificial intelligence, but it also have to do with any system, yeah? Any IT system, like safety, like security, etc. Yeah? Of course, it includes fairness, discrimination, explainability, etc. If you look at, for instance, the Microsoft AI principles, is also towards the end-to-end. Yeah? They pick the whole scope and they make a statement of each of those areas. What does it mean for them, and then how they want to work with that. If you look at Telefonica's principles, they are more towards the AI specific part, yeah? More focused on fairness and explainability. And of course, you have to say something about privacy and security. But for instance, safety is not here, because safety is actually for this industry is if there is safety, it's about mobile antennas and radiation, and that is already completely taken care of in the organization. So there is no need to do something else for AI, because it's already covered. Yeah? So there are different things that you can look at, and actually you can make a decision, yeah, if you are an organization, if you want to focus it more on specifically on AI, or you want to keep it broader. Yeah? Now, of course, there are some pros and cons of each of them. If you want to do an end-to-end, you're sure that you cover everything, yeah? And there's clarity of what is involved. But on the other hand, you have some risk of duplication with other areas in your organization where they're already taking care of it. And it's a very heavy process, yeah? Because you're looking at everything. If you focus more specifically on AI, it's a lighter process. You really focus, so it's easier to do. And you have to then, the problem is that you then have to coordinate very well with all kinds of other areas in the company or the organization where that is already being taken care of. Okay, so this is about, we're talking about the principle level, yeah? Just about making statements, what do you want to, what do you stand for as a company or an organization if you're working with artificial intelligence? Now the next question is, of course, so what does it mean, yeah? How do you bring those principles down to an organization where everybody is taking care of it and taking it into account while buying, developing, or using this kind of technology? And actually, there is not so much work being done. Yeah? It's coming, but it's still very early days. Yeah? If you look again at the EC guidelines of the European Commission, so they are talking about a questionnaire. Yeah? So for each of those 7 areas of principles, yeah, they have questions, yeah? And they have up to, the total is 63 questions that you have to consider for each of those questions. And then if you consider them, then you can say, okay, I've thought about it, and therefore what I'm doing is trustworthy AI or not, yeah? Notice also that they only ask, did you establish something? And you can say yes or no, yeah? There's really no more support to really explain what it happens. Actually, so we've heard that the European Commission now has a pilot process where you can go through those questionnaires. Anybody can do it here if you're interested. It's quite heavy. It's about 2 hours of intensive thinking. There are 7 domains. This is an example on data governance and privacy. And actually, you don't. So you have to pick a service that you're using. It can be a credit scoring system, or it can be a visual system, or it can be a marketing system, etc. And then you ask yourself, for instance, in this case, what protocols, or processes, and procedures did you follow to manage and ensure proper data governance? Yeah? So they don't ask you to answer the question. In this case, they ask you how relevant are those questions for your product. Yeah? So they want to have an idea of whether this evaluation, this assessment list, is good or not. Yeah? So that's what I do. They don't evaluate specific products, but they ask you, if you would use this questionnaire, how difficult would it be for you as an organization to answer those questions? Yeah? And then do you have already procedures in place for all those things, or is it completely new, etc. But so it's still quite hard to do, and you get some fatigue. And what we're doing in Telefonica is actually bring it one step lower. Yeah? Well, we think about a methodology called responsible AI by design, as you call privacy by design, security by design, etc. And then make it consisting of the principles itself, which is basically the norms, values, and the boundaries of what you want to do. A lot of training and awareness of all your people in the organization, that they are aware of it, that they understand the benefits, but also the risks. A questionnaire where they can answer questions, but not only asking, do you have personal data, and then yes or no, but also say, if you have it, what should you do? Yeah? So what steps should you take in order to get towards responsible AI? Of course, you need a lot of tools, technical tools, but also maybe more, let's say, organizational tools to make it happen. And you need governance. And governments will help you to really implement it and establish it in the organization. I will go high-level overview now. If you want to have some more details, we published a paper on that, which you can read. So first of all, we designed an online course for all our employees. It's about a 1-hour course where they can learn about a little bit about artificial intelligence, but mostly about these risks associated to artificial intelligence. Yeah? And actually, depending on the role you have in a company, you get a different kind of content. Of course, the engineers get very technical content, but other people get much less technical content. So it speaks about the principles. It runs through what does it mean implementing those principles, what are the tools that you can use, both internally and externally, governance, and some practical examples, actually running through a product with all the questions that there are. Yeah? So we don't have like 63 questions like the European Commission, but much less. That's because we are focused more on AI-specific things and not so much on the end-to-end part. And then for the questions, there is always a recommendation. So if you ask, have you checked whether your data set is representative for the target group? Yeah? So if you think about the camera, so if you want to take pictures of all kinds of people and your data set only has black people, then of course you have a mismatch. But then you have a recommendation. Yeah? Either what can you think about, what kind of literature is there, or even what tools do you have to check those things. There are a lot of tools that we have built ourselves because we needed them, which we now have made available within the company, which is about anonymization tools, also a tool that checks if anonymized data cannot be re-identified, which is one of the problems that there is, but also a system that helps you check if you have an algorithm that is doing some, let's say, trying to classify things, whether the outcome is discriminating against certain sensitive variables, like gender, for instance. Of course, there are also external tools. IBM has a great set of tools for looking at bias in data. and Microsoft launched open source about explainable artificial intelligence, which you can also use. And this is growing quite fast. Yeah? So that's good. Yeah? And then governance. Governance is important, but we think that it is very important to make our people aware of the risks rather than delegating this all to committees. Yeah? So this is very early stage, and it is not a good way if for everything you want to do with AI you have to ask permission to a committee. Is this ethically responsible? Yes or no? But it's really about self-awareness, and only if people have really problems then they can escalate and ask for help. In general, conclusions. So there are more and more companies who launch principles, and there are more and more companies who are struggling to implement those really on a daily basis as business as usual. But it's moving forward. We also think that not every sector is the same, is equal. It's very different if you are in the telecommunications sector or in the financial sector or in the medical sector or public administration. So there are different things, and some principles are much more important in one area than another area. So that is also important, so to not go for a one-size-fits-all. If you're an organization, our experience is better to focus on what you can act on. So if you talk about, I don't know, malicious use or the future of work, of course, as a company or organization, you have some impact, but really those are government things to be thought about. And then tools are very important, but it's also true that tools cannot solve everything today. Yeah? So if you think about bias and discrimination, most of the examples that are out there are discrimination about gender, because gender is often in a database. Yeah? If you want to know about discrimination about religion or sexual preference or etc., well, actually companies try to get rid of those data as much as possible because it exposes them to privacy regulations. But if you don't have this data, actually it's difficult to make a statement. So there's actually a paradox between privacy and fairness. If you want to be really fair, you have a privacy risk, and if you are very good in privacy, you actually cannot demonstrate that your algorithms are fair. That's a problem today. I believe that it will be solved in the coming years. And then also from a company perspective, this is a multi-stakeholder. Yeah? It is about not only technical, you have to involve many different areas in the company to make this happen and to make it sustainable. Thank you very much.
So we have time for 2 or 3 questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. You have mentioned several times the word security, and you are very right. Could you be more specific in how artificial intelligence can protect a big company such Telefonica of cyber attacks? Thank you.
Well, the security, I meant that every artificial intelligence system that you build has to be secure in itself, like any other IT system. So maybe it becomes a little bit more important, but it's not something specifically for artificial intelligence. If you speak about using artificial intelligence to improve security, like cybersecurity, that's a whole area of work. There are actually companies who deliver that kind of services, and there is a lot of research on that as well. But that was not what I was mentioning.
In any case?
Yeah.
How can it help to protect better of cyber attacks? Because big companies have been attacked deeply from cyber attackers. So there is a new, I mean, of course there is a new, but there is something more specific that you can say?
Well, no, I can't think anything more specific. I'm sure there are lots of companies who are using AI at large, machine learning, whatever, to learn a lot of threats that have been happening and to try to classify and predict whether there are new threats, of course. But that's a whole big area.
Let's go on to short questions and short answers.
I'm a little cynical about all these guidelines for being responsible. We should remember that Google started by don't be evil. And then they went on to invent surveillance capitalism. The question is, it's just, as long as it doesn't cost me too much, okay. But What happens when this principle collide with your business imperative, which is to make profits? What happens then?
Yeah, but I mean, the world is changing, yeah? And companies are becoming more and more responsible. There's more interest about reporting, let's say, intangible results in terms of fair supply chain, in terms of all those kind of things that bring them on the Dow Jones Sustainable Index. So those things are becoming more and more important. Saying one thing is don't be evil. I mean, if you just say it, of course nothing happens. But if you bring it down to an organization, then something will happen. And it's also that, so in the future there might be some regulation on some of those things. Yeah, so companies have to do it then anyway. Yeah, but I agree with you. There is a danger of what they call ethics washing. Yeah, so you just say something because everybody's saying it, and then you think you're okay. But what I try to show is actually that's not enough. Yeah, you have to land it into an organization.
Very short question. Sabu Thomas from India. How do we really define the humane treatment of AI?
Sorry,
more humane consciousness of AI, humane treatment of AI.
You mean the
humane,
so
consciousness?
So one of the things that many companies say, AI should be human-centric, yeah? Is that what you...
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So that is related to, let's say, not have a negative impact on human rights, yeah? So that's why this is a, let's say, a company-wide initiative. If actually we develop a new service now, we bring it to market, we have our sustainability department going through a checklist about whether it has impact, yeah, on the negative impact on human rights. So that's part of the of this thing.
So for other guidelines that we have in society, for example, you have to comply with tax guidelines or with environmental guidelines, we have institutionalized them. We have accountants, and you pay an accountant to make sure that your company agrees with the rule, complies with the rules, right? So, do you see a new business sector arising here where there is a sort of ethical accounting, and there's a certified organization where I can get my approval certificate?
Definitely, I think the next talk is about that. Yeah.
Okay, this was not a setup, but okay.
But I mean, of course, even if it's not regulated, if it's regulated, then of course, yeah, then of course. But even if it's not regulated, there are all the big ones. All the big consultancy companies already have an offering. We have to see what it actually means. But yes, that's definitely going to happen, especially for public administrations, because governments are taking a lot of decisions already in an automated way, but actually don't know whether they are doing something wrong or right.
Okay, so thank you very much, Richard.